Welcome, listeners. Tonight's story takes us deep into the heart of a small Texas town where every neighbor knows your name and every secret is whispered on the wind. Let me tell you about Ben Robertson, a lifelong resident of Shepherd, Texas, a place with a population just shy of 2,000. In this town, even the newest puppy is greeted by almost half the community before sundown, and nothing ever really changes. Ben, steeped in tradition, grew up accompanied by the aroma of fresh bread rising with the dawn. The Shepherd's Bakery, an institution that still bears the grandfather's and father's name, was now Ben's legacy. In Shepherd, the saying, "If it ain't broke, don't fix it," wasn't simply advice, it was a way of life. Every morning, the little bell above the door rang out like clockwork. At 7 sharp, Miss Eleanor would come for her rye, followed by the Millers at 8 for their cinnamon rolls. Life moved in a familiar rhythm, one that Ben had grown to love. Just the day before, Mr. Carter had leaned over the counter and greeted him cheerily. "Morning, Ben. Got that sourdough ready?" Ben, dusting his hands on his apron, would grin while grabbing a loaf fresh off the rack and a generous stick of butter. "I just feed the town," he'd reply, his laughter mingling with the warm ambiance of the bakery. Ben's passion for baking was simple yet profound. Mix the right ingredients, be patient, and you're rewarded, much like nurturing a marriage. Speaking of marriage, Ben's love story was anything but ordinary. Kathy, a bright woman from New York City, had captured his heart when he visited Queens years ago. He recalled with fond amusement how she'd laughed at his boot-clad gait, remarking that those old boots were far superior to sneakers when it came to trotting along a gravel road. That was 24 years ago, and 4 years after that encounter, they tied the knot. Against all odds, Ben convinced Kathy to leave the pace and clamor of New York for the slower, silent world of Shepherd. Adjusting wasn't easy for her, a far cry from city life. But Kathy proved resilient. She built a close circle with local women, hosting monthly barbecues that mixed Southern hospitality with a hint of East Coast pizzazz. Her charm had the town buzzing. One local even compared her style to turning a Target run into a catwalk show. In Shepherd, nothing ever went unnoticed. So it was on one quiet Sunday when Roger Ferguson strolled into town, instantly drawing attention. A man in his late 60s with impeccably tailored clothes and sharp silver hair, Roger carried himself with an aura of authority that didn't quite match the small-town backdrop. Setting up his law practice in an old building on Main Street, where a sign now gleamed with Ferguson and Company, attorneys at law, Roger's presence was impossible to ignore. When Roger first stepped into the familiar warmth of Shepherd's Bakery, Ben was busy kneading dough behind the counter. With a friendly greeting of, "Morning, Ben," Ben noticed Roger's silent appraisal of the shop, his eyes lingering on the faded black and white photographs of generations past. Images of Ben's father, grandfather, and great-grandfather donning flour-dusted aprons. "Family business, I see," Roger said smoothly, his voice soft yet edged with something unspoken. Ben confirmed proudly, 3 generations strong. Their brief exchange, Roger's cash payment with a flick of his wrist and a thin smile, left Ben thinking, that man's a rotten apple. Little did he know, this encounter was only the beginning. The stage was set at a neighborhood barbecue a week later, where Kathy, carrying a tray of deviled eggs, found herself face-to-face with Roger. "You must be Mrs. Robertson," he said, his tone full of quiet amusement. Kathy, taken aback but composed, confirmed, "I am, and you must be the new lawyer everyone's been talking about." Roger mentioned he'd grown tired of New York's relentless pressure and noise, and moved here to enjoy some peace of mind, a peace that would be short-lived. As their conversation took on a hushed, almost conspiratorial tone, Kathy couldn't help but notice the lingering scent of expensive cologne, the gleam in his cufflinks, and the allure of a man steeped in wealth. The contrast between the rugged consistency of her husband Ben and the seductive promise of Roger stirred something deep within her. A longing for luxury, a desire to rebel against the ordinary. Kathy's inner turmoil was not a new affair. For years, Ben's unwavering principles had kept the bakery and the town's community afloat. Even when jobs were lost and factories shut down, Ben always found a way to help his neighbors. But behind closed doors, arguments brewed between Kathy and Ben. "We can't simply raise prices, Ben," she once pleaded, frustration etched in her voice. What about us? How are we to dream of a vacation when every day is consumed by dome margins and a broken oven? Ben, ever steadfast, insisted he was simply taking care of the town. Kathy, however, felt trapped in a constant state of mediocrity, and it was at one of those long, string-lit nights when she made a choice that would change everything. One evening, under soft glow and encircling fireflies, Kathy handed over a slip of paper bearing her phone number to Roger with a whispered, "Call me sometime." That single gesture would ignite a forbidden flame. In the days that followed, phone calls turned into flirtatious conversations. Roger, with his tales of affluent achievement and quiet power, seduced Kathy with promises of glitter, ease, and a life filled with luxury, a life Ben could never offer. Soon, their illicit rendezvous became routine. Kathy found herself caught between the comfort of a man who had built a life on principle and a seductive stranger who spouted wealth and entitlement. Her faked moans and whispered affirmations were fueled by a desperate hope that Roger would one day be the passionate lover she craved, even though deep down she knew no one could replace Ben. At the same time, a sinister plan began to congeal between Kathy and Roger. At a time when Ben had traveled to Houston to inspect bakery equipment and the house was unusually quiet, Kathy's determination to change everything surfaced. Standing by the window, phone in hand, Kathy dialed Roger. "The kids and husband are away," she murmured. With everything set in motion, they arranged a clandestine meeting 2 blocks from their home. Kathy, with measured anticipation, left the safety of her house and met Roger in his sleek black car. That modern house on the edge of town, cold and devoid of warmth compared to the familiar embrace of the Robertson home, would soon bear witness to a passion that was quickly turning to betrayal. In a brief but charged encounter, they undressed in haste, and soon Kathy was in bed with this man who promised her a life of luxury. Yet as she lay next to him later, the silence between them spoke louder than any whispered caress. His touch lacked the gentle warmth and familiarity of Ben's. What she craved was not just the sparkle of money and glamour. It was the depth of genuine care that only years of shared life could provide. And so, though Kathy returned often to Roger's bed, laughing, murmuring, and showering him with encouragement, her heart beat a constant rhythm of emptiness, a secret that kept her from voicing what she truly felt. This delicate balance was shattered one evening on a large leather couch in Roger's modern living room, as he stated plainly, "You're holding yourself back, Kathy. You need to drop him." Kathy, her eyes flickering with a dangerous resolve, replied in a low, chilling tone, "Fine. If I must be the villain, then villain I shall be." Their plan was ruthless, an all-out assault on the life Ben had built. Kathy's words were laced with a cold finality. "We'll pile up charges, paint him as the abuser, and force him into a corner so that the town turns against him." Roger, ever the storyteller, promised a narrative steeped in cruelty and power, one designed to ruin his rival's name and legacy. Ben, oblivious to the dark tide gathering behind his back, continued his morning rituals. He brought home warm croissants, kissed Kathy on the forehead as she poured his coffee, and never suspected that beneath the normalcy lay a tragedy waiting to unfold. But Kathy knew that a man of Ben's unwavering belief and pride would never relinquish the bakery or his children without a fight. "He's not giving up custody," she whispered fiercely to Roger over a shared glass of wine. And so, the battle lines were drawn, a war waged through false charges, manipulative narratives, and the tragic interplay of loyalty and betrayal. 3 days later, as Ben drove back from Houston, a familiar curve welcoming him home, the flashing lights of a patrol car shattered his routine. 2 blocks from his house, Officer Mark Dalton, a friend from childhood, stepped forward with a heavy manila envelope. "Ben, I wish I didn't have to do this," Mark said, his voice shadowed with regret. Inside the envelope were divorce papers and a restraining order, accusations that Kathy had filed domestic abuse charges against him. Ben, trembling as he unfolded the devastating documents, argued, "That's a lie. You know I'd never hurt her." Mark, his eyes downcast, reminded him that he was merely the messenger and that any misstep would bring severe consequences. Desperate and enraged, Ben called for help from his children, Kevin and Kelly. Their voices, first shocked, then resolute, broke into heated conversation as they vowed to make Kathy regret her betrayal. Don't do anything stupid, Ben pleaded, his voice cracking with a mixture of fury and sorrow. Yet even as the children rallied, the seeds of bitterness had been sown, and the explosive confrontation between loyalty and deception began to unfold. Meanwhile, Kathy's world unraveled further. At a neighborhood barbecue, while she tried to blend in with forced smiles and casual conversation, whispers filled the air. When she encountered Roger, now more than just her lover but her conspirator, the tension between them escalated into intimate admissions of their plan to destroy Ben's life. "I'm tired of being the small-town wife," she confessed as she sipped her wine under the dim fairy lights. "I need revenge, and I'm done pretending." Roger's calm promise to hit Ben where it hurt most, his dignity, his bakery, his very identity, was the final nail in the coffin of a life built on trusted routines. In the midst of this storm, the town's residents began to unravel the threads of a scandal that none could escape. At the courthouse on a turbulent day, Kathy stood firm as the judge questioned her about the abuse claims she'd made against Ben. With Kevin and Kelly testifying in unison that their father was kind and loving, the court was abuzz with the painful truth. Kathy's allegations were but crafted lies. The restraining order was lifted, at least temporarily, and outside the courthouse, as tensions flared, Kathy's fury spilled over. "You're all worthless," she screamed at her children, confirming that in her eyes the only acceptable fate now was ruin, and her children's loyalty had been irreparably fractured. Outside of the courtroom, Ben's quiet departure, ordered by the police, was laced with disbelief as he bade farewell to his kids, feeling pain with every step. And then, in a series of gut-wrenching moments, the scales tipped further. George, the children's stoic grandfather, arrived unexpectedly at their home. His presence brought the cold, unyielding weight of old family honor. With his daughter Linda close behind, he confronted Kathy in a manner that was both silent and condemning. The passage of memories from the legendary exploits of Machine Gun George during a desert operation to his present-day heartache was recounted in every measured step as he slowly made his way from room to room. In a sequence of slaps, hushed threats, and raw, unspoken disappointment, Kathy faced the consequences of her actions, leaving behind a trail of shattered trust and irreversible betrayal. Later that night, with the storm of retribution still raging, Ben found his world further altered. He returned home from a late bakery shift to find that his life had been turned upside down. A restraining order, a severed marriage, and a community split by scandal now defined his existence. In a desperate call to his children, Kevin's seething anger and Kelly's tearful solidarity, Ben resolved to fight back. "Stay put," he told them in a trembling tone as he arranged for backup, his voice emerging as both a promise and a curse. As if fate had a twisted sense of humor, events escalated further. That very day, the children arrived home to find their mother, Kathy, accompanied by Roger. The tension was palpable when Kevin angrily demanded to know, "Who the hell is this man?" Kathy's response, delivered with unnerving calm, confirmed that Roger was now not only her lover, but her attorney, an alliance forged in a bid for power and vengeance. The children's shock and dismay echoed through the silent house, as they realized that their once familiar life had been utterly transformed by deceit. In the following days, the town's normal rhythms continued, but a dark undercurrent seeped into every corner. Grocery store clerks refused service, and even familiar faces cast disapproving glances at Kathy. At a local cosmetic shop, she was told in cold tones that her style was no longer welcome, a bitter reminder that the community had turned its back on her. Desperate to reclaim some semblance of confidence, Kathy visited a beauty salon, but as bleach burned her scalp and clumps of hair fell away, the mirror revealed a patch of near baldness that left her mortified. Even the stylist's complimentary new cut felt like a mockery. That evening, in the cold silence of Roger's home, a drunken Kathy ranted about betrayal and shattered dreams. Roger, clearly agitated by the mess unfolding around him, tried to point out the disaster in his own life, a ruined office, a maimed reputation, only to be met by Kathy's fury. Tempers flared, and in a moment of explosive confrontation, Kathy's hand slapped Roger's face. Desperate, he pleaded, "Kathy, wait, don't walk away." And in that chaos, the depth of their mutual self-destruction was laid bare. The next day, the courtroom was filled with tension as Kathy recounted her fabricated domestic abuse story against Ben. The testimony of Kevin and Kelly, affirming their father's kindness and condemning Kathy's deceit, only deepened the wounds. The judge's decision to lift the restraining order against Ben was a stark rebuke to Kathy's plan. Outside the courthouse, as the police ushered Ben away, Kathy's rage exploded, shouting vicious words that pierced the quiet of the day. George's arrival to take the children away signaled that nothing could restore the shattered family bonds. At this point, I want to pause and thank you for listening to this intense story. If you're as captivated by these twists and turns as we are, please consider subscribing to our channel and leave your thoughts in the comments below. Your engagement means the world to us. Later that night, as silence settled in a dimly lit room, Kathy and Roger's united deceptions began to crumble. Kathy, fed up with the humiliation that had plagued her in this judgmental town, resolved in a fevered whisper, "I'm done playing the victim. Ben's gonna pay." With a cold determination, she dragged Roger along one dark morning towards Ben's bakery. The air was thick with tension as Kathy clutched a loaded pistol, a symbol of ultimate retribution. Approaching the bakery in near silence, from the shadow of streetlights and the quiet hum of early morning, Kathy's hand trembled as she raised the weapon. In that heart-stopping moment, shots rang out like thunder. By the time the echoes faded, two bodies lay still. Kathy and Roger had paid the terrible price of their betrayal. Ben, who always began his day with the comfort of routine, arrived at the bakery at an unusual hour. A police officer with a soft, measured tone broke the news. "She's dead." Ben's face fell into disbelief as he learned of the tragic end of Kathy and Roger. The community, once so tightly knit, was now forced to confront the bitter aftermath of secrets and lies. As Ben processed the events and transferred a substantial sum to Officer Mark Dalton, a final act of grim retribution, he revealed a dark irony. The electric company had unwittingly provided him with the evidence he needed. With a chilling satisfaction, Ben recounted how hidden microphones and whispered reports had sealed his rival's fate. "It was business," he murmured, a cold smile tugging at his lips. Later that day at the cemetery, Ben stood alone beneath an overcast sky as the caskets of Kathy and Roger were lowered into the earth. No mourners gathered, no comforting hugs were exchanged, only the solemn sound of spades cutting through soil. With deliberate contempt, Ben approached the graves, unraveled his zipper, and let bitter words stream over the fresh earth. "I'll be back on your birthday, our anniversary, and the day you died," he vowed, his words echoing the finality of his heart. Then, with hands shoved deep in his pockets, he turned and walked away, leaving behind a trail of unresolved grief and seething rage. In the days that followed, Shepherd tried its best to return to normal. The bakery opened on time, its ovens once again filling the streets with the comforting scent of fresh bread. But Ben's home, usually filled with the warmth of family and routine, now felt hauntingly empty. One quiet evening, as he stood by the window, a small German Shepherd puppy bounded up to him. Max, with oversized ears and boundless energy. In that fleeting moment, as he knelt to scratch Max's belly and whispered, "Good boy, truly a good boy," Ben's bitter heart was momentarily soothed by a spark of pure, unburdened joy. Thank you for joining us on this dark and winding journey through betrayal, loss, and the heavy price of vengeance. If this story struck a chord with you, please remember to leave a like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth tales. Your support keeps these stories alive. Stay with us for more stories that dig into the human heart. Stories where even in the harshest betrayals, the simplest moments of kindness can be found. Until next time, take care and remember that every secret has its price.